So all that jargon has to change. And I think there is a huge role to play to bring people in crypto. One of the things I'm most passionate about, the number of people, especially women, who tell me, I don't understand it, so I can't join. I'm like, nobody does. So please join.
On behalf of Gaurav and myself, it's a pleasure to host this episode, and it's a special episode. We normally focus on a single founder. Today, we're going to focus on a theme, and a very important theme, and hopefully some practical help and advice as well will come out of this session. We're going to focus on this massive gender gap and diversity gap in an industry that we all love and we're part of, fintech and financial services. I have three amazing founders with me, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And rather than talk over themselves, we're going to go in alphabetical order by first name. So Bianca, over to you.
Thank you, Ronit, and thank you everybody for having me here. My name is Bianca Lopes. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been in finance most of my career. I have a specialization around digital identity, and I spend a lot of my time across the globe helping us ensure that we're building ethical technology and transforming banking for the better. That doesn't come without its challenges. I currently today sit at the UN for AI and Ethics, and think that there's a lot to be talked about here in this panel around the diversity needed in the room for us to build a better and more connected world. So thanks for having me.
I guess I'm next. Thanks, Bianca, for that amazing intro. And thanks for having me here. Marieke, Flament. So I'm the CEO of the NEAR Foundation. NEAR Foundation is a not-for-profit based out of Switzerland, which goals is actually to raise awareness of the NEAR protocol. The NEAR protocol is a layer 1 blockchain, which is fully sharded. So therefore, that means working on proof of stake. I'm sure we can come back to what is blockchain, what is crypto, and how all of that works. But basically, what we aim for is building also an inclusive and diverse world that goes and connects anything from Web3, open web, and also things such as DeFi, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Same as Bianca, I'm actually passionate about diversity and inclusion. I spent most of my career in technology, and I'm actually a computer science engineer by background, and I see too much and too often the gap. And my deep belief is actually, if we don't have diversity and inclusion when we build new technologies, we won't have diversity and inclusion when those need to be used. So again, thanks for having me. And I guess with that, Tram, over to you.
No, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot first to Ronit and Gaurav for this very special invitation, and a really great pleasure to be speaking with Bianca and Marieke. I'm Tram, Nguyen. I'm the co-founder of CFTE, with a global platform for education in fintech and the future of financial services. And I co-founded CFTE a couple of years ago, actually in 4 years ago, with the objective to equip professionals and students with the skills to thrive in this new world of finance and fintech. And the idea is very much today, with 100,000 people upskill from all around the world. So not only in the UK where I am, but everywhere around the world, to be trained with CFTE. And today, diversity, inclusion, very, very important to me as well. Very passionate about the topic, and we'll discuss more. But my background is not in education, it's in traditional finance. So I used to be a trader in New York, then moved to private banking at UBS, wealth management in London. And before being an entrepreneur, when I left the world of traditional finance after 16 years, I realized that we were not all prepared for tomorrow's world. We were not prepared for this new world, and technology is having a huge impact on finance, but very few people are aware of it. So hence we launched CFTE to help individuals from all around the world to acquire those skills in digital finance, to look for opportunities in this exciting new world. So I'm very, very pleased and also very excited to share what we see in the industry, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks a lot.
Thank you everyone for your introductions. Traman, tell us a little bit more about, you said it's all about people, it's all about skilling, upskilling. What are the skills you need to succeed in fintech or financial services in the future, and how are they different to the past? And I know you guys have done some primary research in this space, so could you please share that with us?
Yes, no, thanks a lot, Ronit. Indeed, I think the way that the finance industry we used to hire people or grow people is very, very different today. Today, we indeed launched a report, which is called the Fintech Job Report, which we launched, which is now a book, but really much the idea is that it's a report that we conducted by connecting with the largest fintech unicorns, so the 225, there are more today, but when we launched a couple of months ago, 225 largest fintech unicorns around the world. And what we did is that we analyzed all the new jobs that didn't even exist a couple of even years ago, 40,000 new jobs, and we mapped them to create this book as a taxonomy to what are the jobs being new and created for the industry, what are the skills and the competencies. And so lots of good findings. I'll share with you a few things, but I'm inviting everyone, to go and look at the report. But of course, significant amount of money has been invested into fintech. In the last decades, more than 200 billion has been invested by venture capital and private equity in fintech startup. Fintech has become a major part of financial services. People think that is very niche, but in the book, we are proving that actually is one of the largest, equivalent to 38% of the banking sector in terms of market cap. What does it mean is that fintech industry is an important employer. It means that fintech, if you compare fintech as a city like New York hiring 450,000 people, London 400,000, fintech on its own is 300,000 people, which is a lot. So it's the third largest city in the world, employing a lot of people. The reality is that when we talk, and I spend a lot of time talking with fintech unicorns, is that they can't find talent. There's a big mismatch between what is offering, lots of opportunities out there, but people don't have the skills. So there's a big gap. So this is what the book is about. What are the skills and the competencies? And in a nutshell, but I invite you, to read the book and the report that is downloadable, on our website. But you need a lot of skills. It's not the type of skills that perhaps was the type of skills that I was hired when I was in a bank, but those are knowledge skills. You need hard skills. You need those skills that perhaps, you didn't have to know before, but those are the skills that are measurable. For example, in the form of an assessment, you need to learn about fintech, AI, the right foundational knowledge to do your job. And today there are lots. So soft skills, very, very important. Because we are in this world of technology, I think soft skills, such as, for example, collaboration, teamwork, leadership skills, all these skills are the skills that is quite needed in this tech world. Mindset, and I think Bianca and Marieke will totally agree, but today mindset of being adaptability, resilience, and thinking like an entrepreneur, really, really key. On top of this, industry knowledge, industry, sector, general knowledge. For example, I can mention one example, but AI in compliance or fintech ecosystem, all those industry knowledge is important. And I think compared to before, experience. You need at any level, from students to professionals, to show that you have an experience, either work or degree. So that's the main problem that we face, is that if anyone wants to join into a fintech companies today, how do you prove that you have this work experience? So that is a nutshell, but just to summarize the book and the skills, I would say is that, and we summarize it by saying technology is eating finance. If you don't understand technology today, if you don't have the skills and digital skills, I think it's going to be very hard for anyone today to be joining fintech companies or even in financial services. But I'll stop there. But I would thanks for asking the question.
Sure, and to hone it, so to zoom in on that point on skills and training. We want to give a little bit of airtime to a program that you've been working on here in the UAE, which is of interest to Gaurav and myself, as you're both based in the UAE. So please, could you share a little bit about your program with ADGM, and maybe explain to the audience who are ADGM, or specifically the ADGM Academy, and what are you doing to help sort of bridge this, which is not a UAE issue, it's a global issue, the lack of diversity in fintech?
Yes, exactly. It's a global issue. It's a global issue today that we're facing. Is that first, there's huge demand for talent into fintech. There's a huge demand of talent who can understand finance, technology, innovation. There's huge demand because there's huge opportunities out there. And we work very closely with ADGM MA, which is the first. ADGM is the regulator of the Abu Dhabi, and ADGMA is the academy, so the training arm of the regulators in Abu Dhabi. And CFT is working very closely for years now to really find solution to upskill and reskill and train first the whole government, but the whole of the region into digital finance, into AI, into fintech, a lot of different topics that is really needed. And we've realized with ADGMA, the academy, there was a huge need to also bridge that inequality and that gap that we see, is that we need talent. So we've worked with the idea of skilling a lot of people and people to help them to find the right talent. So Abu Dhabi Global Market Academy, in collaboration with CFTE, we've announced a program which is 100 scholarship for those who want to acquire or advance the skills in finance and technology and in fintech. 50% of the scholarship will be given to women. And we are still, I'll tell you more later, but the idea is very much to give opportunities for women to learn online. It's an 8-month program to really help women to get the right knowledge and skills into fintech, and then get them an opportunity after that to have a line in their CV so that they can find after that jobs and opportunity or career growth. We're doing 50% for women and 50% also for people that are coming from totally diverse background. And when I say diverse background, is that today the fintech industry is really diverse. We are really looking for people from totally different background, not only people from finance or perhaps tech, but people, and I see it through CFT, but also through the scholarship, that we have people from prop tech, reg tech, people from the health industry, people, lawyers, entrepreneurs, consultants. So this is what the program is all about. This is also what we see in general around the world, this appetite from people to know and to understand much more about the fintech that is really looking for great talent.
Great. We'll come back to some of the program details, I'm sure, later on in the conversation. Bianca, you've worked in multiple geographies, including the UAE, where I think we met a few years ago in Dubai. You're originally from, if you indulge me, I'll give you the potted biography, originally from Brazil. You worked in Canada, you worked in Europe. When you started out your journey in fintech, what would you have liked to have known? Like if a program like this had existed, like the ADGM Academy Fintech Scholarship or the CFT training, but what was it? Tell us a little bit about your early days getting into fintech and financial services, and what would you have loved to, if you could go back in a time travel,
Yeah,
maybe not a DeLorean, but if you could time travel back, what would you have loved to have been taught or mentored on?
Well, my first job in finance was actually in banking. I ran a futures desk and I work at RBC in Canada. And I was the only woman that the guy I worked for had ever hired other than administrative staff. So that gives you like a little bit of a window into like the timing of, working in investment banking and joining this kind of environment at the bold age of, I don't remember, I think it was 21. So at the time, I wish I had more support. I wish I had people that I could look up to and see. Like a lot of the times people say there's not enough talent and there's not, I just spent some time riling 31 women in Brazil to write a fintech book and tell them that, our entire nation could change if we bring exactly what the is doing in terms of education. I wish I had more resources at the time and understood that some of my questioning skills actually were really useful and really needed. And I think today, spending so much time in Web3 and spending so much time in data science, personally, I see that change. Like, I'm pretty critical of the fintech industry and the fact that, you know, we all say we've innovated so much, but there's 30% of the world that doesn't have access to basic things. And no offense to any unicorn, but, you know, there's people starving, there's things that people don't have access to. So I actually think that at the time, I wish I had more mentors perhaps, and more skills of saying, you know, these different ways of you looking at the problem are actually great, lean into them, and then find the hard skills around technology. I'm an economist and I have a degree in master's in mathematics. So I ended up going towards the technical side like you, Marieke, and understanding the technology. And that kind of gave me an edge. But when I look at a lot of the traditional finance paths or fintech paths, most people, unfortunately, are not as fortunate as I have been, and get told in a particular track. And you still hear these today, right? Like, there's absurds that I can go back to in the beginning of all of our careers that we can talk about of the fact as an entrepreneur, I've gone in front of investors and had people ask me if I want children. And I'm like, how about the business I'm trying to talk to you about? Like, how's that? Like, can we talk about that? So I think that backbone in investment banking in the beginning of the days was really great in hindsight, but I wish I had more incentive towards saying, come change finance. Like, I think fintech, the whole premise around here is, how do you innovate? We all know that you can't run away from technology and exchange of value. So yeah, looking back, I don't think it was intentional, but it was shepherded by some decisions or some comfort zones that I had in the past. And I wish that was more systematic. I often hear, you know, I heard you talk about experience. And I think, you know, look at the DeFi or the Web3 space. There's some things here, sure, cryptography has been around for years, but there's some things that have happened or been built in the past 6 months. So what does that look like as an opportunity? How can women out there in the beginning of their fintech career look at this and say, wait a minute, somebody learned this in 9 months and built a multi-billion-dollar business. There's got to be a way that if I'm applied, and with this much resources out there that we have today that I don't think we had when I started my career, it was a very closed conversation. It was like, you're going to go into the talent and then they'll tell you what your path is like. I think there's a lot more agency in today's world. And I think it's about fostering that agency in women.
Thank you. I want to bring in my partner in podcast crime, Gaurav, because I think he's got some questions for you, Bianca.
Shoot away.
Thanks, and again, it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you for taking the time out. I think this topic is something that we could talk about in many different segments, but in one part that I'd love to highlight, and Bianca, with you especially, because you know you have a lot of global experience, you have a lot of institutional experience, you have a lot of startup experience as well, and I wanted to focus on that for just a second and understand, you know, drawing down from your visibility, do you see a lot of difference in the way that legacy institutions and financial services are, you know, quote unquote, trying to change in terms of diversification versus how, when you look at companies that can build billion-dollar companies or institutions within a 9-month timeframe, are doing it right from the outset, right? And I think that's an interesting way to try and compartmentalize the conversation when we're looking at it, because fintech today, as we know it, with 200 billion coming in versus trillions that already exist in there from an ecosystem that's actually there. They're two very, very unique changes that need to happen from a legacy infrastructure or from a new institution, new wave of thinking. Have you seen much of that difference in how legacy institutions are perhaps trying to put change officers in place of diversity with actionable difference versus how ground up, like people like Shivani Siroya from Talle are trying to do enablement, not only with their own organizations, but the impact that they're creating? What do you see from your side of visibility of, say, 30,000 feet view?
I, as you mentioned, I work with a lot of central banks, and I'm starting to see at least the central banks around CBDC and around digital identity to understand the importance of diversity for finality, for building a system that's truly like equitable. It's not about being just inclusive. It's about everybody having like a fair share of having a seat on the table that they should all have just by being born and being a human. Without never getting invited to talk to Citibank again, or any of the larger banks or institutions.
Wait, I don't mean to put you in a lot more.
Like, don't put me in a corner. I'm kidding.
That's okay. Back from that question, I can pull it back. I don't mind.
No. I'm happy to talk about it. I think I've worked with large institutional banks across the globe, and Citi has an amazing woman CEO and a lot of initiatives that are beyond what I call muffins and diversity day of the month. A lot of that's still happening. Like, I still see a lot of the diversity conversations, or the Women's Day conversation, or any of these framings being about a particular lack thereof that women are supposed to have, versus actually what are the perspectives that we need on the table to build better products? What are the perspectives on the table that institutional finance has historically? Like, we all should be ashamed in the fraud business of how much, we just account to error. A lot of that, when you start double clicking on the technology and the processes and procedures, could actually use the energy that often is on the women's committee. Like, it should be on the technology conversation. So I think that where I see the difference with perhaps more nimble organizations or fintech organizations is that they're able to implement that from kind of being born. I still find that some of the large institutions, and there's a high degree of variance between the world, obviously. Like, if I look at Brazil versus I've worked in India and China and Middle East, there's cultural differences, but there's a lot of that sort of partitioning. Oh, this is the diversity activity, where I'm a firm believer that should be, what are we trying to do? And are we looking around the table and ensuring that this inherently looks diverse from not only just a gender perspective, but a set of skills or a set of questions and ethos that the people need to have in the room. I don't know if I answered your question there, but.
No, you did. And, I want to drill down a little bit into the regional aspect, because we're very much a MENA-based focus as well. I'd love to understand what you've seen. I have my own viewpoints from everything that, I have a legacy business, I have everything else. I have a different viewpoint, but it'd be very interesting to have your viewpoint as well of what you're seeing in this region as well.
I've seen some change working in the Middle East. That's been really refreshing. And it's often, you still go to places in the world that they look at me and they're like, you're going to go to Saudi Arabia? And I'm like, yeah, there's amazing leaders over there. There's a regulator that wants to change. There's a massive expat community. So there's an inherent mix and vibe. When I worked in Dubai, I still saw the Emirati population not being as skilled or as involved. And I think that there was a massive amount of effort that I've seen some of the institutions I've worked for in making sure that changes, and investing in the skill training and giving people an experience. I think a lot of the times the differences geographically are to do with where do you set the bar? How do you set the bar? And how do you look at the traditional, you need to have 7 years of experience in this? Says who? Do you need to prove that you can understand a framework and then be told, here's your guardrails until you figure it out, and then maybe you can come run a department? I've seen some bold changes in the Middle East. I hope and expect to see a lot more. And I think given everything that's transpiring right now, I certainly have a ton of friends migrating towards the Middle East and looking at opportunities. And I think that can only hopefully bring better solutions, more inclusive solutions, and solutions that can be also exported elsewhere.
I can confirm that with the current house prices, you're right, a lot of people are coming here. But thank you so much, Bianca, for that.
You're most welcome.
It's definitely a take that sheds light on progress that's being made and progress that can be better attributed elsewhere. I'd like to take the opportunity to come to a guest that last but not least, definitely a legend in her own right. That's actually moved from place to place, and well, I think the advocate of disruption is the title that I'd love to bestow upon you. So I mean, with no further ado, Marieke, and am I saying your name correctly? Can you tell me what's the correct?
Look, I won't get offended. Yeah, it's Marieke if you want to say the French way.
I would like to say it properly. Yes, Marieke. From your perspective, again, you're somebody that's championed change in different ways, not just technology, but the way that people are, brought into the perspective of organizational change as well. And I'd love to hear more about your story, because you started this quite a while back as a champion, and again, geographically moved around. But where did you start? I believe Europe is, if I'm not correct, and then the United States. So I'd love to hear about how that came about, what sort of took form, and where did you see things actually change, and where do you see change not happening? So if you could give a bit of an input on that, that would be fantastic as well. Your journey is very extensive, so, and thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for these super, super kind words. So I'm actually French by background. I'm trained as a computer science engineer. I've been very lucky in my childhood to actually move around a lot. So we lived, for example, in Holland, in Italy, and in different places. And that already framed me in understanding that actually people speak different languages and therefore have an entirely different view on the world. I actually completed my degree in China. So I moved to Shanghai, learned Mandarin, and then I started working. Yeah, so it's actually China. It's the other way around that I went. I learned Mandarin there, and then I started my career. I worked for LVMH, and believe it or not, not because I was, necessarily passionate about the luxury goods industry, but more because I wanted to stay in China. I love China. I think the pragmatism of what I learned there, and this idea that there is always a solution and you can actually find a way forward, is one of the things that I learned there. And so I started my career in Shanghai, working for LVMH in the IT department. And then I was given an opportunity, and I had an amazing mentor, actually. So I know, Bianca, you talked about like mentorship and seeing people and people seeing you. And I had that opportunity early in my career to have someone who saw in me something that I didn't know I had, which was that I could do financial analysis. And so I moved to Hong Kong to work in financial analysis for the LVMH group. That made me realize very quickly that I didn't understand much about business. I was like, oh my God, a whole new world. So how do I retrain myself? And I retrained myself. I went to business school. I studied at London Business School, which was an amazing opportunity, again, in an environment where I met people from all different types of geographies and background and so on and so forth. And that was absolutely phenomenal to learn. I then went into strategy consulting, learned the skills there of actually what does it mean to think strategically and communicate. That was in Paris. So I went back for the first time to work in my home country. I will admit was difficult. I think at some point when you leave your roots, and I'm sure, Bianca, you have the same, like when you leave your roots, you don't belong anywhere anymore. And then it becomes like, where do you go and who are you? So I did that. Then I actually had an opportunity to join Expedia and Hotels.com when Hotels.com was still small, learned from phenomenal leaders, actually, how to build technology and how to grow and scale businesses. Again, had the opportunity to be mentored and shepherded by several people who saw in me opportunities and I could do things. And then in 2015, and that's been a turning point in my career, I remember getting a call from a headhunter talking about a Bitcoin business. And I thought, hang on, that's for drug dealers, not doing that. And actually the headhunter insisted. He said, please read the brief. I was like, well, fine, if you insist. So I read the brief, and it's one of those moments when I remember exactly where I was when I read the brief. And I thought, hang on, where have I been? Like, how come I haven't looked at this technology or understood what blockchain was and so on and so forth. So that's when I first actually joined something that is fintech. I haven't been trained in finance or any of that. So my, learning in that space was stiff and it was hard, but I knew technology and I wanted to learn. I had the opportunity to learn with amazing people. Jeremy Allaire, the founder of Circle, is a phenomenal visionary. And so I saw from that, how you build a business and how you actually think, you think vision and you think big and bold and how you can actually embrace that. Fast forward, I actually, so I went through a crypto winter, which is also extremely hard, is when everything goes down, how do you actually handle things and what do you do? I also happened to I became a mom at that time. So I was like, okay, maybe I can change gear and do something different. And that's when I joined NatWest to build from within the bank. So from within a very large institution, building a neobank. And that's a whole different set, right? So I learned there also a lot of actually structure and processes, but also the things that actually, I guess, are holding the industry back, and the very difference between a startup from scratch and a fintech and something that can move fast versus legacy institutions. And then a couple of months back, I had a call for something that first I thought, hang on, if that technology really exists, then this is what I thought we could have when I first joined blockchain. And so when the NEAR team reached out, and NEAR is a phenomenal technology, it's a layer 1 protocol blockchain, carbon neutral, fully sharded, looking at how can we do things that are scalable, but also usable, right? Because one of the things in Web3 is that most of the tools today are not usable. And actually talking about diversity and inclusion, you know, if nobody can use it, but just a small group of people, we're never going to get to where we need to go with, I think, something that is an absolutely transformational technology, right? So one of my passion and one of the things that I know the NEAR ecosystem is very, very focused on is actually how do we make sure that what we do, we attract more people. So education is a very strong pillar in what we do. How do we make sure that we attract more people, that we attract talent that is actually from all walks of life? We spend a lot of time, you know, localizing content. I think too often in fintech and in crypto, we think, oh, it's in English and it's like GM, which is good morning. I'm like, who cares? You know, GM to me, when I first read it, I was like, okay, so I need to go, oh, it's in English. Okay, fine. So like in French, how do I say it? You know, so all that jargon has to change. And I think there is a huge role to play to bring people in crypto. One of the things I'm most passionate about, the number of people, especially women, who tell me, I don't understand it, so I can't join. I'm like, nobody does. So please join. Because actually, you know, but that's the reality is that, you know, Bianca said it. Bianca said like 6 months ago, 9 months ago, most businesses didn't exist. So this, you know, this realization that we're all trying to figure it out. And again, like the top people in that space will tell you, they'll tell you, I'm not an expert. I think no one, if anyone is claiming to they're an expert in crypto, please revisit their judgment because it's not true. So anyway, so long story, but this passion, I've seen firsthand the, you know, when I landed in my computer science engineering school, we were less than 10% women, and I felt out of place. And my first instinct was actually leave. And that's why I went to China. And actually, in hindsight, changed my career and my trajectory, but also it was quite sad that I didn't feel I could fit in. So yeah, anyway, that's thank you for that great question.
No, but thank you for sharing, because, you know, it just goes to show the vastness of your experience through different ecosystems, geographies, culture sets, legacy infrastructure versus new ecosystems, right? The adoption of people's mindset from an organizational point of view, an acceptance point of view, internally and externally when it comes to fintech businesses, right? To your point, when you talk about job descriptions for fintechs, you know, I'm part of a 40-year-old fintech company. From when we used to put out job description, it was purely for engineers and managers, right? Today, when you're talking about, you know, people who are looking at fintech job descriptions, the number of roles inclusive from B2B or B2C businesses is so vast now that, you know, you don't necessarily need to be qualified in a certain set or segment to be part of a fintech group to add to a diversified workforce, or to a team that actually can address a product or service that is looking to target enabling a group of people that were either you know, ill-equipped or unequipped completely to have access to basic financial products or services. So I think, you know, that's that color and perspective that you put on through your own personal journey is very important for people to reflect on, while, you know, having a corporate institution that has much of a way to go, and being, to Bianca's point, efficient, and, you know, to Traman's point of having the ability to understand the contextualization of the opportunity for people to be involved in the space and make genuine change and work together in these spaces. So thank you for sharing that with us. And on that note, I'd love to hand back to Ronit.
Maybe before we wrap up, I could just ask two final questions. Maybe one to Traman, but before that, Marieke, your point about, I don't want to say running away to China, but I think you kind of said it. It sort of reminded me of a long Twitter thread and discussion I had with some friends a couple of months ago. You said 10% of your class, your CS class, was women. And I remember reading about this a few months ago, and you probably, all of you will know this history better than me, so I don't know why I'm saying it, but if you go back to the 1950s and 60s, the start of computer science as a kind of profession or a study in the US, it was seen as a woman's job. And then it changed as the prestige, as it went from being basically a back office or a support function to more economic and social prestige. And Marieke, you've worked in many parts of the world, and oftentimes I hear in America, and I know it's like in Brazil, but in the US and in Europe, there's this big gender deficit. But I talk to my friends who are from India, and they say, what are you talking about? My CS class was like 50-50, and then I began doing research. Actually, I had, I'm not going to embarrass her by naming her on this program, but a friend of mine messaged me and said, of course I studied CS. It was nice, it was air conditioned. I would be in the marketplace and the bazaar. It was it was actually, and then you could graduate and go and work for one of those big white collar firms that have been booming in India the last 20 years, and you got nice jobs. And actually a lot of the patriarchy in a way that worked the other way in India, where dads would say, that's a safe job for my daughter to do, and would push them into CS. And it kind of almost opposite to the US. And there are stats from Malaysia that you're familiar with. Again, it's 50-50 in Malaysia. So I don't know, Marieke, if in your sort of travels around the world, if you've come across anything you want to share about these, how, it's not so much that it's a structural thing that it has to be a man's job or a woman's job. It's very contingent. It's very specific to particular moments in time. And Tram, I've got a question, if you could talk about specifically the ADGM program, and you could just share more about, I didn't realize it was an 8-month program. So gosh, what are they going to learn, the men and women, for 8 months? So, but maybe first with Marieke.
Yeah, great. And I think you're absolutely right? It's very cultural, and very often actually it's like the upbringing and the stories you hear when you're a kid and how that translates. And so I've seen actually many differences. I think also one of the things that when I was working in China really struck me was you didn't have the sexism that you have, for example, in countries such as France or Italy. I mean, I worked in Italy, and let me tell you that I was a coder in an Italian company, but I was basically always thought of as the secretary, right? Or even in, it happened to me, even in the UK in a large bank. I remember one of the meeting, and I just gave my business card at the end of the meeting, and the people around the table looked shocked because they are just assumed that I was the EA, and actually I was the managing director. So, wrong statement. So I think it's really cultural on how you see people. I've seen, for example, in actually a market that with NEAR we work a lot with, and right now is under tremendous stress, but in Ukraine, for example, there is actually more gender diversity in a very, very technical background, which means there is also an amazing pool of talents that, as a community, we're all trying to take care of. But there are definitely differences in geographies that you see, and I think that's great. But I think it's also a reminder, in countries where we don't see that at any stage in life, and especially upbringing of kids, that's where it starts making a difference, right? If for little girls coding looks like video games, they're not going to associate with that. But actually, if for little girls coding means, creativity, and how do you bring things together, and how do you play, then we all have a share in it, right? So I think it all starts very, very early in the journey.
Thanks.
So the final word of the program, Tram?
Yes, no, thanks a lot, Marieke. No, thanks, Ronit, for asking. So the program is about having the skills to get into fintech. And for us, it's we will give the opportunity to 100 scholars. So please, anyone that are still interested, you still can apply, because we'll end the application at the end of the month. So still a lot of people can still apply, and we'll give to every student, every professional student, our platform Think, which is a go-to platform for professionals looking to understand what are the latest technology trends impacting the financial services industry. So a catalog of short courses, but people will have the opportunity to learn anytime about fintech, regtech, what is CBDCs, bintech, big tech in financial services, innovation, digital transformation, courses on leadership, courses on very also how do you do center design product, for example. So it doesn't have to be very on the knowledge, but also on soft skills that is in demand today. How do you design and be very client centricity? So all these will be available, and all the professional students will be having an opportunity to also ask questions with the people that taught on our platform, and then after that have the opportunity to be together as a cohort, because we understand that it's very important to do peer-to-peer learning, so they'll get a chance to actually exchange what they're thinking. And what they'll have also, which I think is really important, we've seen it without the lack of traveling, but also this opportunity to learn what's happening elsewhere. What is happening in, for example, Singapore, Hong Kong. We have people from Japan. We have people from pretty much everywhere. So we have a video explainer taught by people from the ecosystem to understand exactly what's happening in, for example, fintech in the MENA region. So pretty much a lot of courses so that people can really get not only the hard skills, but also the industry knowledge and the sector. And so the people will get a chance to have the view from global, from the industry and globally. So no, it's great, and I think it's what we want to do: create an opportunity for people from different walks of life, as Marieke was saying, encouraging people to really have this opportunity to be lifelong learner and continuous learning. You know, as the industry is looking for great talent, encouraging people to grab it and grab the opportunity of a decade. We're looking for great talent.
As Gaurav said earlier, we could talk for hours, but Marieke reminded us that we all have other things to get on to. Our three guest speakers have businesses to run. So thank you so much for joining us, Bianca, Marieke, Tram,